Kia ora koutou katoa, talofa lava, good evening. Welcome to Shirley Intermediate for this Green Zone community meeting. Chris Meni is my name and I'm the Community Board Chair for Shirley Papanui. And this is right on the boundary of our ward, along with Hagley Ferrymead this way and Burwood Pegasus just over here. But I got the privilege to host this meeting. 16 days ago we were in this hall for the first of this series of Green Zone meetings. And my estimate would be there's about a third of the number that were here at that meeting. Is there anyone, hands up if you were at that meeting, the first one? Bit more breathing space tonight, isn't there? One of the things with Shirley Intermediate is that they've now become host to the Santa's workshop. So I'm not sure if you've heard of that urban legend of an organisation that used to be down at the Shirley Community Centre. They've set up camp in the woodwork room here, thanks to the school. And we missed them last Christmas, but they're on target for getting about 900 to 1,000 toys made for kids this Christmas. So it's good to see you, Garth, who's in the audience, and a few other familiar faces. Good to see you all. So look, community boards have been relatively quiet. I just wanted to mention our role, if you didn't know. We are a statutory committee of the City Council, and our role is to advocate for community needs. So we've been relatively busy doing what we do, and we haven't made a big song and dance about it. But one of the things we have been doing since about April last year is continuing to plug the needs of those most vulnerable communities in our ward, namely Shirley, St Albans, Brooklands and Spencerville. So can I just have a show? Are there any Spencerville or Brooklands residents here tonight? Welcome in. Thanks for making the trip. Any from St Albans who have come across? Hello to you. And any from Shirley? Oh, good number. What about Dallington? Are there any other areas that I've missed? Belfast and Kaipoi. Richmond. Oh. Look, you're all welcome. You're all welcome here. Some of the feedback that I got as the host and facilitator 16 days ago was that people were saying, you let too many of those loud people talk for far too long. So I'm taking on board the feedback. So tonight we're going to run the same process that we've done for the several meetings we've run so far. I'm going to pass the mic over to Roger shortly, and then we're going to have two speakers and then a break for questions. Now that break for questions, we'd like to use that for generic questions that you think are relevant to a whole bunch of properties or an area. So for example, we know Dudley Creek is a big issue in this area. So if you've got Dudley Creek sort of issues, we're happy to take those questions. So we'll have, to start with, we'll have Bruce Emson from EQC and then John McSweeney on behalf of the insurers. Then we'll have that break for questions. Now, the insurance companies that are here tonight, just so that you know if your company's here or not, we've got Southern Response, Tower, AA and IAG. Have I missed any insurance companies? Lumley? Wave if there's a Lumley person. Hey, come on in. And State. Thank you. So then we'll have our first break for questions, generic questions. Then we'll go to Building and Housing and Christchurch City Council. Then we'll have another break for questions, and then we'll wrap up with CERA and myself to close. So at the conclusion of the presentations and that generic questioning, you'll have the opportunity to come and talk to any of the speakers who have been on the stage or any of their colleagues who are around the outside of the hall. So if you've got individual property issues or house issues, that'll be the time to do that. Now those who were here 16 days ago would know that I think there was a sense with over 400 people in this hall that people thought they weren't going to get their individual question asked or answered. Now, within half an hour, everyone who was here had had that face-to-face engagement with that person that they wanted to speak to. And they either had an answer for them or they took their name and they followed up that question. So with not as big a crowd tonight, I think you will all have that opportunity to speak with the person you need to. Look, I think that's enough from me. I may have missed a couple of things, but I think we'll move on. Roger, welcome.
It's really nice to be here tonight. I thought maybe I should just start off just talking generally about our approach to the TC3 stuff. Shall I start off talking about that? And I think there's an awful lot of frustration out there by just about everybody in the room. And I think for a lot of people, they felt that when we did this labelling of land as TC3, we were sort of slowing things down. And the idea with actually having, if you like, a land, a technical category, was to actually try and speed up the overall speed of the recovery. I've got a slide here which I'm going to race ahead to, which I can't help myself. But this is the amount of this is the liquefaction we had in Christchurch on Friday, September the 4th, and you can see Hagley Park is here, and the river's wandering around here, and the sea's obviously out here. But that's what happened. That's sort of the liquefaction map from the February event. So you can see it's a pretty extraordinary sort of map. You can see pretty much everything that's east of Hagley Park, and quite a lot that's, and those other northern parts of the city have got large amounts of liquefaction and land damage. And I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but there'd be sort of like 70 or 80,000 properties that had some sort of liquefaction effect, on their property or around them. So our issue was that unless we sort of had some technical categories that said where we wanted to put the most effort into making sure the land was good before you rebuilt, then wherever you were, almost anywhere in Christchurch, before an insurer would rebuild a house, they'd want to do all sorts of complex land testing, drilling holes, designing expensive foundations. And we thought that actually wasn't such a smart thing to do. What we wanted to do was almost like the hospital. We wanted to triage the places that needed the most attention. So the idea of having TC3 was to say, let's make sure we put the resources, those smart geotech engineers and those people, into the places where they can actually have the most benefit. Because otherwise, if you like, those geotech engineers, and I'll make up a number, 500 of them, we're going to be spread out over 80,000 customers or 80,000 properties. This way, they're spread out over the 25 or 30,000 TC3 people. So our principle was to try and do something that sped up the recovery by making sure that we're putting them into the areas where they were most needed. I know for a lot of you that's news that maybe just doesn't make any whole lot of sense to you, but it is actually, the idea was to try and speed things up. Because otherwise, if you make up a number, if there's 40 drilling rigs in the country, if we have those 40 drilling rigs spread over all the city, it's going to take longer than 40 drilling rigs and the associated engineers just spread over the 25,000 people who are TC3. I guess the next thing we did with TC3 was trying to come up with standard foundation designs. And I think we've really mismanaged this. In fact, when we said we're going to come out with these standard foundation designs in April, everybody kind of expected, well, that means in May they'll start fixing my house because there'll be these standard foundation designs. And we haven't managed people's expectations well, because now these standard designs are out. People are still slow, people actually getting their foundations fixed, getting new houses built. But we thought if we didn't actually have standard foundation designs, what would happen was someone would come to go and fix Chris Meany's house or my house or whatever, and it'd be on land that was damaged. And if they needed to build a new foundation, they'd almost have to go back to very first principles and go, well, I've got this sort of land, it's this sort of house. The good ground is 3 metres below the house. I'll try designing this sort of foundation, and that would have been very resource intensive. And then also that design then has to be checked off by someone, and every design would have been kind of unique. And our idea was that if we came up with standard designs, an engineer could say, well, gee, it's this sort of land, it's this sort of house. I'll use the D7 foundation design. And I'll just use the D7 foundation design. I'll draw a drawing. I'll call it D7. All the builders in this area know how to build a D7 foundation. And what's more, the council know how to inspect and consent a D7 foundation as well. So the standard foundation designs is also designed to speed things up and get things going more quickly. It's also supposed to give people confidence when you sell your house. That if people actually know that your foundation design is to a standard foundation, when you go and sell your house, they might say, well, it's on TC3 land, but gee, it's got a D7 foundation. You know, everybody knows D7 foundations have worked really well. That's great, I'll go and buy this house, rather than it being some bespoke foundation designed by John Mackenzie, who died 32 years ago, and no one really knows whether his foundations were any good. So I guess the next part of it is so that's, I feel like, why we had land categorisation. And the next part of it is the foundation stuff, and I've talked about that. And the third part is the insurance industry. And I think a lot of people are really annoyed with how the insurance industry is performing at the moment. But I guess, you know, in my work, I kind of think there's wars and there's battles. You know, and people are having battles at the moment trying to get things done, and it's driving some people it is actually driving some people mad probably. But there's a wider war of trying to keep the insurance industry and the reinsurers confident, so they carry on insuring us in New Zealand, and they keep insuring not just New Zealand and Wellington, but also Christchurch and Richmond and Dallington and every other part of Christchurch as well. And we thought, unless we had some standardised rules, what would happen is the insurance industry go, well, gee, really, what is going on here? How do I know this house is good to insure going forward? So we thought we had land categorisation and standard foundation designs, you know, the D7 foundation or whatever they're called. The insurer would get engineers to look at it and go, well, gee, we actually like these foundations. We agree with the government. We think a house built on these good foundations, if there is another design earthquake in Christchurch, this house will perform as well as a house way out the back of Islington or Sockburn or in Rolleston or wherever where they're sitting on 4 metres of river gravels. So we thought it was extremely important that we keep confidence with the insurers and the people who insure them, who are called reinsurers. And so far we've been successful. There have been lots of world insurance events where there have been disasters, floods, New Orleans and so on, where the insurers have actually said, gee, we've hated this event, we hate this, we hate the government, we hate everything, we're off and out of here, have a nice day. And we did not want that to happen. So when I'm thinking about my day-to-day work, while I really want the recovery to go a lot faster, the war I really fight, if you like, with the insurance industry is keeping them in New Zealand and keeping you insured. And I think we're just a banana republic where we make up designs and we fix houses without putting a lot of thought into it. They'll go, well, actually, they built crap houses here, that's why they've fallen over. The new houses they're building are no good either, we're out of here, they're not insurable. So that thing about trying to keep the confidence of the reinsurers has been absolutely key to what I wake up in the morning and I think I have to do. The reinsurers are still here, they're still insuring us. The latest, and I get these little snippets of news coming through my office, so I see lots of stuff coming in. And that latest news is that Mr. Westpac has done a deal with with Lumley to offer what's called contract works insurance with a reinsurer from somewhere long way away.
But not for TC3 properties.
Including for TC3 properties. They've said they'll also do it for TC3 properties. That was actually in their media release that they put out. So that's another, if you like, indication that the reinsurers are still there. EQC, travel around the world talking to these reinsurers because they're not based in New Zealand. They tend to be based in Munich or Zurich or the Cayman Islands, one of those places. And their reinsurance program, it's costing them a lot more than it was, but nearly all the people that were offering them insurance at EQC are still insuring them. So that's a key thing. In terms of the question about insurance going forward on TC3 land, that's been one of our key things. How do we actually make sure these new foundation designs are so effective, the houses are strong enough, so if there are further earthquakes, they perform really well, and that the insurers have confidence, therefore they can carry on insuring houses on TC3 land. That's a key thing we're trying to do, and I think we're there at the moment. Various people at the moment, EQC have run trials of building some of these TC3 foundations and have tried breaking them up by doing things to see whether they're strong enough. I know another construction firm at the moment that's built a foundation of 60% of size, and they're now going to try and get it out of level, pretend there's been a really lot of liquefaction around, and they're going to try and re-level it and reassure themselves that those foundations are strong enough and they work. And that's one of the key things I'm also trying to work with the wider industry, so those guys will actually build foundations that everybody has confidence in. Because we want you to have confidence you can go on living in your houses, and they are going to continue to work in that very unlikely event that there's going to be another quake, which there won't be. I know. Yeah, I know. In terms of the progress we're seeing with rebuilds going on in TC3, Southern Response has put something up on their website. So Southern Response has got about 40% of the market. They're the old AMI. So they've got 187 properties at the moment in the design and documentation stage that are in the TC3 area. So they've got something like 2,500 properties in TC3, and they've got nearly 200, this was from a week ago, in that design and documentation stage. So that's not thousands, but things are starting to happen there. And some of the other insurers are also got stories to tell around that as well. There's been talk about how long it's going to take to get your house fixed. And I found it really frustrating when there was rumours out there that it was going to be 8 years. Did anyone hear those rumours? Yeah, I mean, I'm yet to find I'm yet to find out which insurer really will own up to saying it was 8 years, because I haven't found anyone who says it's 8 years. So what I've got from the publicly released information is that IAG, who are Lantern, State, NZI, they want to get everything done by the end of 2015. Southern Response by the middle of 2016. Vero, the latest start date for the rebuilds will be in 2015. Tower, expect to complete within 2 or 3 years, but some outliers up to 5 years. So most of them are actually starting to put stuff out there to try and give people reassurance. And flight of view 3 or 4 years isn't reassurance, but it's more reassurance than 8 years. I guess the other thing that we talk to insurers about, and I've talked about publicly, is about how long what I call the 76-year-old widows living in badly broken houses are going to have to wait for. And so we brought that question to them. The insurance companies are saying the vulnerable, older people or people with health problems will be prioritised. IAG, yes, those with uninhabitable homes, the elderly, anyone with a health issue, families with young children will be prioritised. Southern Response say something very similar. Vero say something similar. Tower say, yeah, they're all saying very similar things. And I think the program is actually starting to wind up now, but for a lot of you that's kind of hollow words because you still haven't had nearly enough action. But I guess the fact that, for Southern Response, they've got nearly 200 places actually in that design documentation stage is an example of things are starting to move. One thing all the insurers say to me is once they say, right, we're going to rebuild your house, it takes some people a long time to work out what they're actually going to do. Because people do want to choose door handles, bathroom taps, all those things I've never got the patience to get any involvement in whatsoever. But people do want to do that sort of stuff, I know. Aren't people bloody crazy? But the overall time frame people say at the moment from the rebuilds that are going on out there is they say from the moment they say, right, we're going to rebuild your house, because people hesitate about choosing the bathroom taps and all that other sort of stuff, is that it's about 42 weeks. So that's actually not particularly fast. I mean, often you can build a house in 3 or 4 months, but some of that design stuff simply takes time, and that's partly because we in New Zealand love to choose what our house looks like, and where everything is. Maybe that's something you talk to your insurance company about. Actually, I'm willing to have a stock standard, gardener, JG gardener house of this design. Have a nice day. It's exactly the same floor areas of what I've got. I'm getting nods from around the room here. But anyway. The last two things I was going to was about flooding. There's a lot of worries about flooding. So, I think, there is, people have worked out flooding levels. They're starting to work out the flooding levels around Christchurch in future events. What we've found is the places with the worst flooding tend to be the places that have gone red. And that's kind of logical. There are some properties in Christchurch, and I think Dudley Creek people are talking about, where there is a greater susceptibility of flooding, that's right. And what we're trying to do is when we put that information out there, we want to put it out in a form that's actually understood by people. Saying your PDP 1134 level rises by 32 centimetres actually doesn't mean anything to almost anyone, does it? But saying that a once in 200 year flood, the water level will still be 3 inches below your floor level, you'll still have 3 inches before it gets into your house, is a sort of language I think people understand. And it takes time to put all that analysis into a format people can understand, because then we put it out in a way the format people don't understand, it just causes stress. But all the work I've seen indicates that while there is more of a flooding risk for some parts of Christchurch, it's quite a small number of properties, and the extra flooding they get actually isn't that great. And if you think about it, that's kind of logical from the point of view, we're not a grey mouth, where if it floods, what you're really getting is flooding from the Grey River flooding out across the countryside. Our flooding tends to be about the rain landing on the ground and then not going anywhere. So if you get another inch of rain on the ground, at the worst case scenario in Christchurch, you get another inch of water on your land. If you've got a grey mouth, you get another inch of rain in the hills, you might get 4 inches of rain through your house because, there are these bloody valleys. We aren't a valley here. So while we have more flood risk, because the water spreads out right across Christchurch, that flood risk, while it might be worse, it isn't that much worse. And I'm really determined when we put that information out, we put it out in a format people can really understand, because we don't want to cause people more stress than they're already under. We also, when we put it out in a way where the insurance companies and the CCC are also saying the same thing. You're not getting conflicting advice about what this means as well. I've got some slides here I suppose to do. Shall I whip through these really quickly? So you know who's here tonight. This is being videoed, and it'll be up on our website tomorrow morning or the day after. So if you want to watch it again, you can watch it home on the computer, or if you've got a son or a nephew or a brother who lives in Auckland or Hong Kong who knows about this stuff, you can watch it with them. Get them to ring you so you don't pay for the toll call. But we're trying to make it accessible, and we're trying to put it in a format. And we also want your comments on how we can make these meetings more effective as well. So roles, responsibilities. So CERA, we've done this land zoning stuff. The building and housing, they are actually the ones that came up with the land categories, TC1, TC2, TC3. They also did the foundation design stuff. And all that work was done by very smart engineers who are passionate about their work. It wasn't done by a bunch of the St Martin Scout group over a weekend looking at some tables. Do you know what I mean? They're very serious people who've taken their job very seriously. EQC, insurers, I think you know who they all are. Shall I talk about why land went red? Should I do that? So land went red, I'll do this quickly, was because you couldn't fix a house. The basic rule was you couldn't fix a house without area-wide work occurring. So in the areas like Bexley, the land would have had to have been raised by something like 0.5 metre, and then to stop the lateral spread, you had to build massive stone walls that might be 10 metres wide, 10 metres deep. And they were basically just like this bloody great hunk of mass to stop the land sliding towards the river. So it was that area-wide thing that meant the fact you had to fix the land on an area-wide basis before you could get your house fixed or insured in the long term. And that sort of work was going to take a long time. Those engineering solutions, like those big walls, we weren't certain they would work, and they'd have to pull down every house, pull down every tree. It was going to be very disruptive as well. And in general, in those places, the infrastructure was very, very badly damaged. The green stuff, which is the majority, there's about 7,778. You can see, I know, not quite 777, 7778. And we say the key thing there is you can rebuild your land on an individual basis. Now, there's a slightly confusing thing. Some of the land damage in the red areas actually isn't as bad as some of the land in the green areas. But the point is, we think some land that we read was because we thought in a future event it could be really badly damaged and the insurers might not want to insure it. We think the green land is all insurable going forward. Even if it's damaged, we think you can rebuild your house on that land if it's a write-off with one of these stronger foundations, and it will work, it'll survive future quakes. So this is these extraordinary slides. I mean, it's kind of bizarre, isn't it? I mean, we all thought we'd been through so much in September than we had February. So you can, and this is just, no, can someone quit the lights? No one's by the light switch? No. Go on, yeah. Another one? No. I was going to say, I mean, you can see this blue in here, which is the TC3 stuff. The red is the red, but the blue is these areas of blue are the areas that are the TC3. So you can see that a bit better now? But what I'm just trying to show is that, not everywhere they got liquefaction ended up being TC3. It's that whole trying to, work out where to put the resources stuff. The red areas, it's how many Hagley Parks. 4 times the area of Hagley Park. Kind of bizarre number, isn't it? It's funny we don't talk like that. If you're an American, it's twice the area of Central Park in New York. And
32,000 acres.
Sorry?
32,000 acres.
Yeah, it's an amazing number. And this is, I guess, sort of your area. You can see the blue here. Is there some TC2 people here as well? Yeah, okay. So I guess, I'll let Malcolm talk about it. TC3, what it means is, if you need your foundation fixed, or a new foundation, they're going to want to do some drilling. They're going to get some drilling results on your land or land near you to work out what sort of foundation you need. So, and in some cases, when they do that drilling, they're going to say, well, actually, your land doesn't need any sort of special foundation. In some cases, you will. But then when that drilling is, they'll work out exactly the best sort of foundation you need, depending on the kind of house you're going to have, and also depending on how far it is before you get down to good ground. And Malcolm and Bruce will just talk about this drilling. You all know a bit about this drilling program, a little bit. They'll talk a bit more about that too. Did some of you apply to be red who'd gone green? Yeah. So, some people wanted to be change colour. We had a zoning review done by a guy called Keith Turner, who's overseen a lot of geotechnical work, and he had a team working for him. And about 1,300 people applied to change colour, and about 102 or something ended up changing colour. So most people wanted to green, wanted to be red, but a small number were red and went green. But we think we wanted an independent process in, but yeah, and we've done that. So that's all I have, and I was now going to hand over to Bruce Emson from EQC.
Thank you, Roger. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think I've met a few of you. For those I haven't, my name's Bruce Emson, and I head EQC in Canterbury. Can I ask a different question tonight? Is there anybody in the room that doesn't have a problem with EQC? One lady. That's wonderful. I'm grateful you put your hand up, because I've got a number of my staff in the room and they didn't. So I've got a real bloody problem tomorrow. Yeah. Look, I'm going to spend some time talking about the drilling program. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about apportionment. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about land, and I'm going to spend some time talking about commitments. So let me start with the drilling program, which is all around TC3. And as you'll see from the slide, TC3, at a glance, there's about 27,000 homes in Christchurch, Canterbury, who are TC3. Doesn't mean all 27,000 need this drilling program we're going to talk about over the next little while. So about a third, and these are rough numbers, not exact, have no foundation damage. If you're in TC3 and you don't have foundation damage, your repair can be moved on now. In fact, EQC has repaired in excess of 2,000 homes out of those 27,000 already. So no foundation damage, your repair can be moved on today. If you've got less than, and this is a dangerous comment, about 25% of your foundation damage. If less than 25% or roughly of your foundation is damaged, you also don't need a building consent, and therefore you don't need a drilling program.
You need a consent if it's structural. You cannot get around that.
Oh, thank you for that. We need a consent if your roof needs replacing or there's structural damage to your home. I'm talking about the foundation piece there at the moment.
Your foundation's structural, Bruce.
But if you've got less than 25% of your foundation damage, you don't need a consent. And I've got my colleagues from the council here and they can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. There are about 25% who have foundation damage, and I suspect that's a good number of you here, and that's about 10,500, and that's for whom the drilling program is focused. So it's roughly that number of homes where we know there's foundation damage, or there might be a few more, where the drilling program is critical. We'll just spend a little bit of time about TC3 and the timelines. I'm reminded regularly we're at 2 years and about 2 weeks from the original event, or maybe a bit longer now. The green zone was established by CERA in June last year. And then in October we had the 3 shades of green determined, so 1, 2 and 3. Building and Housing undertook that process, and as Roger said, that was around trying to focus the resources in the area of greatest need. In about December last year, TC1 and 2 foundation repair guidelines were released by Building and Housing. And in March this year, we started the drilling program. So it's been underway for a while and we've done over 2,000 drills so far, or holes so far. It was April that the foundation designs for TC3 were released. And that was as a result of a whole lot of work undertaken by Building and Housing in an effort to try and get some generic foundations, as Roger talked about before. So those foundations weren't released until April. We have a drilling program underway at the moment. Now, there's 2 dates, and this is confusing. If you are an EQC customer, that is if your damage is less than $100,000 in your property, and you're with a Fletcher EQR or EQC repair, the drilling will be completed by March 2013. For everybody, because the vast number there is, it's a March 2014 date at this time. And that's based on resource and collaborative working with the insurers. But for EQC customers, and that's the 100,000 repairs we have to do, every home will be repaired by the end of 2015, and you will not have to talk about EQC in your community anymore. I'll make the 1,000 people that work with me redundant, including myself, and we will leave. You won't have to worry about us again. If you've got damage to your property in excess of $50,000, will be completed in your property by the end of next year, 2013. So the worst will be dealt with first and the rest picked up after that. And those are firm commitments. We talk a little bit more about the drilling program. We're trying to focus, as Roger said before, on the vulnerable first. So the vulnerable for us, we're working with other government agencies and trying to identify those people. And there's all sorts of issues around Privacy Act and the other things that ACC has brought to our attention recently. But largely it's around age and health. So I have a plea to you tonight. If you know somebody that's vulnerable, who is struggling desperately as a result of this process, we have an ability to prioritise those persons. Now there's 100,000 homes for EQC to do. We can't do everybody at once, but we're trying to focus on the vulnerable along with the total project as we go forward. We've repaired over 22,000 homes so far. That's all in Emson. There's 80,000 more to do. But the vulnerable are our focus to start with. We don't know who they are. You do. So if you do know, can you let us know? With drilling, we can't come onto your property, and I was shocked at the meeting I did earlier in the week, without asking your permission. We turned up in somebody's home and started drilling in their driveway. That can't happen. We have to ask your permission. So if the phone rings and someone says to you, I'm from EQC, please don't hang up. Because they might be saying, I'm part of the drilling program and I need your permission to come onto your property, and that's really important. Please give us that access. We're trying not to go into homes if we can. We're trying not to go into backyards and moving trampolines and kids' toys and dog kennels. We're trying to do this with as little disruption as possible, but I need your permission. We're drilling from the east to the west, and that's not because I live in the east. That's because that's where the worst damage is. So we're trying to address the worst first from a drilling perspective. And where possible, we're trying to align with our friends from SCIRT. Makes little sense, as you'll appreciate, us walking into a street that SCIRT have just resealed, done all the underground services, and we start to drill in holes in the wall, or vice versa. So we're trying to align that process with them. And as I said earlier, we've done over 2,000 holes so far. And if you want to know where we are and where we're going to be, it's on our website. This is where we are now. We are putting more rigs on as we go. This is on the website. We're going to tell you when we're finished, where we are, and where we're going. And the reason I haven't got where we're going is up here is because the slide's too small. It's on the website. Now, there's been a conversation around why we're not drilling every home. And that's an effort to try and move faster. So originally the requirement is, so if you're building a house in Wellington or Auckland, you're required to drill 2 holes, if you need a geotechnical report, on your section. If you roll that out across the program, each one of those 10,500 sections, 2 holes on every section, getting in and out of every section, is going to take us an extraordinary length of time, far more than I've talked about already. So with the support of the Building and Housing and the City Council, or the councils, we have agreement that we can drill on a broader base. Now the comfort I need to give you is that doesn't mean we don't know what's under your home. It's not people like me that make the determination where we drill, it's geotechnical engineers and structural engineers, the people who need the data to design your foundation. Roughly, it's 1 in 3 properties will be drilled. And in North New Brighton, where we started, we effectively moved up the street, and we started on the street and moved through it. And what it says to us is we've got sand, we've got sand, we've got sand, and the next hole we might get sand and some peat. And at that point, you reset your requirements for drilling. So we're getting consistent data, and that's what the geotechnical engineers and the structural engineers are looking for. And the effort is to try and speed the process up. Working in collaboration with the insurers is the same thing. If, as you can imagine in your street, if your neighbour is insured by Southern Response, you're with IAG, the third person is an EQC account because it's under $100,000, and the next person with Tower, if we don't combine this process, you'll end up with 4 rigs coming into the same street drilling 4 neighbours. And that again is a resource issue, and it's not about cost, it's about efficiency. So that's what we're trying to achieve. I've been working with the insurers now for some months to try and get this to work out. So not every property will be drilled. I'm happy to take questions about that further if you wish. What does the process look like? First off, we have to mark out the area. Now this is sort of 6 to 8 weeks in advance of the drills arriving. And that's the geotechnical engineer and the structural engineer saying, I need you to drill there and there and there, because that's where I look at the properties and I look at the damage and I look at the area, and this is what I want you to do. And then we have to ground truth, basically radar. It runs across the ground and says, don't drill here, there's a sewer pipe. Don't drill here, here's the electrical cables. So we have to get ready to do the process to make sure we don't disrupt you any more than possible. And that takes a bit of time. The easy part is the drilling. So there's 1 of 2 sorts. They're both there for you. I know it's not particularly clear. That's a cone penetrometer test. Basically a spear pushed into the ground with an intelligent head on the top of it that measures what's in the ground as it goes down. I'll show you the output in just a second. The other one is a traditional bore that pulls a core back out that the geotechs can look at and say that's how your ground's made up. And that's the purpose here, to try and get what I like to loosely describe as a photograph of what's under your ground. It's the subterranean photograph we're looking for, or they're looking for. Then we have to put your property back as we started. So we take photographs before we start, we put it back as it was. So the clothesline was there, the kids' toys were there, the kennel was there, put it back. The data then gets interpreted, and this is where it becomes the technical piece, and the purpose we're doing this is for the black art of geotechnical science. So a geotech has to interpret what I'm going to show you in a moment, and he provides that to a structural engineer who designs a foundation for the dwelling you want. So if your home is going to be brick and tile, or it's going to be weatherboard and timber, or it's going to be steel with lightweight foundations, the structural engineer is the person who has to design your foundation for your land, and that's the purpose of this exercise. So it will withstand whatever's going to come again, and God forbid it does. That's the purpose. Then we go to council to get a consent, then the building can start. If you're with your insurer, talks about the process Roger talked about. Do you want silver taps or bright ones? With EQC, we put back what you had. I'll talk about that a little further as well. So then you're in the repair process. That's roughly what it looks like. That's what the data looks like. Can everybody see it from the back? You've probably got a better view than I have, because that's what it means to me. It is not for fools like me, it's for geotechnical engineers and structural engineers. If you want it, you can have it. You can get it through your geotechnical engineer. This is not something we're trying to keep from you. In fact, the purpose of trying to collaborate with the rest of the industry is this data can be put into a common pool so that everybody can get the benefit. So what we drill, we put into the pool, what IAG and Southern Response drill, put into the pool, so everybody gets the benefit of the program, regardless of who paid for it. The drilling program I've talked about to date is $50 million. And that's your money, if EQC spends it all. And that's the reality of the cost, and that's why I'm trying to do this on a more efficient basis. If we quickly turn to land, so TC3 is not related to your land damage. TC3 is about what's required to build your home on your section. As you probably know, each time you put in a claim with EQC, you get a land, a contents and a dwelling cover. So each time you ring up and say, the earth shook yesterday, I want to lodge a claim, you get 3 lots of cover. We are addressing land as we speak. So there is an entire piece of work around land compensation and your entitlement under the Act for land. This is the only country in the world that insures land. So there's more to come. My message here is that is not part of the TC3 requirement for getting your dwelling repaired. Repair to your land also won't change your technical category. So your TC3 at the moment, it's my understanding, and someone else can confirm it, that you're going to be TC3 tomorrow. So if we determine that you only need a TC2 foundation, that's not going to change the designation on your property. Now for land damage, we are posting out packs now to every one of the 85,000 people in Canterbury who have a land claim. And you're getting that in the mail between now and November if you are in TC3, and December for everybody. So it's 85,000 of them. It's effectively a photograph of your property, aerial, and all the observed damage we have from each of the events that we've observed, including from LiDAR, that's the plane shooting laser across the land that is flown after every event. It's all the observed damage we have from all the assessors we've pushed across your land. So you've had land assessors, you've had building assessors, all of the observed stuff we're sharing with you. All of the data we've collected to date, and there are millions of data sets, are up on our website. And sir, if you haven't got access to the website, I apologise, but you can get that through access to the web, and it's called the Stage 3 Land Reports from EQC. It gives you photographs of Canterbury and everything we've seen. And the assessment that we're going to provide comes next, because whilst we've assessed where the damage occurred, we now have to have a conversation with you, because we've got a contract with you around your damage on your section and your entitlement to compensation. And that's coming next, and it won't happen until next calendar year before we can start this process. This is another massive stream of work for EQC. As I said, it's another 85,000 claims. I appreciate that timeline probably frustrates you. It's within the 2015 time frame to get us done and dusted, and we're doing it as quickly as we can. I need another 200 people to carry out this piece of work. Everybody heard the word apportionment? Happy with that? No. Me too. After the September event, EQC's view of the world was your insurance, or your EQC cover, was only intact for the event of September. That was challenged by the insurance sector, and a High Court judge determined that your EQC cover stays in place regardless of whether your house has been renewed or your insurance policy, when your insurance policy gets renewed. In other words, if you've lodged a claim for each of the 5 big events, you have 5 lots of $20,000 of cover for contents, $100,000 as a cap for your dwelling, and your land entitlement, which I won't try and describe at the moment. So if you've lodged 5 claims, you have up to $500,000 of cover on your dwelling. There are about 20,000 properties we need to get into an apportionment process because when EQC started the process on the 4th of September 2010, we had $6.5 billion in the Natural Disaster Fund. We as New Zealanders had accumulated that by our levies. So each time you buy a fire and general insurance policy from your insurer, you pay a levy whether you know or not. I didn't. I didn't know what it meant. To the EQC. And over the period from about 1946, 47 through to September 2010, we had accumulated $6.5 billion. By the time I close those doors and make everybody redundant in EQC, we will have spent over $12.5 billion in Canterbury. A small shortfall. 6.5 we will burn. That is the New Zealand Natural Disaster Fund. 5 billion of it is coming from the people Roger described, the reinsurers, the people that insure your insurer, and in this case EQC. They have a right and a demand to know that they are paying for the damage they've insured. So if you play the 6.5 billion out, a good chunk of that is going to be consumed by September. And then we move into our insurance. So EQC is insured by the reinsurer. And the reinsurers want to know when we invoice them for their $5 billion of this rebuild that they're being invoiced for what they are accountable for. So we have to demonstrate to them the damage done to your home was 20% in September, 65% in February, some in June, and a little bit for those of us out east in December. If I could just make the comment, December 23rd, anybody have any damage done to the home? You're one of 50,000. Just December 23rd, there are 50,000 more claims. So we have to determine, and we have to show the reinsurers what we're invoicing them for, they are obliged to pay. It's really important, as Roger said, around confidence, because if they choose not to reinsure us, we won't get insurance. And it's not just Canterbury, it's New Zealand. And can you imagine not having insurance on your car, your boat, your house, your contents, your business? And that's the reality of what we're dealing with. We are dealing with our insurers. So I apologise for those of you caught in this process, but we simply have to apportion every claim that is going to be in excess of, to determine if it's in excess of one cap payment, $100,000, will move to your insurers. This has never been done anywhere else in the world before, and we're doing it manually. So I've got 100 people that sit in a room and do this day after day after day. And they're doing it as fast as they can. And to date, we've moved about 14,000 of the 20,000 claims across to the insurers. So there's a big bunch of them done. There's a lot more to do. My commitment to you is that will all be done by May next year or sooner, if we can find another way to do it. There just isn't another way to do it. It's just the same.
If there was no inspection done after the September earthquake, and the first inspection was done in April in my case, how are you going to determine how much damage was caused in September, how much was caused in February, and then apportion those?
So we have a massive data set. So after September, we'd done 85,000 inspections, and then the world turned on us again. So there's 85,000 data sets. After September, we'd flown LiDAR. After September, the geotechnical experts had walked across the city in various guises and shapes. So there's a massive data. So we are able to, on a relatively scientific basis, or in fact a good scientific basis, apportion based on, we might have inspected your place, but we might have inspected your neighbour or a person further down the street, and that's the data we're trying to accumulate. So it's not specific to your home, it can't be, we just didn't do all the work. We've done over 400,000 assessments, but it mightn't have been your house after each event. But we've got sufficient data to satisfy the reinsurers that we've got accuracy. And literally yesterday, I had the largest reinsurer in the world in our office. In fact, it was today. And they have 200 billion euros under management, a company called Munich Re, and they are confident our process is acceptable to them. And that's bloody good news. Now, for you as an individual, doesn't mean a lot. I accept that, but I've got to think, as Roger does, holistically at times, around the entire community. I apologise for you unreservedly for your own frustrations. The task is just massive, and we're going as fast as we can. Finally, Some commitments. Our vulnerable I've talked about. I need your help, please. Help me identify these people. Land claims, your packs will all be out for those of you in TC3 by the end of November, for the entire community by the end of the year, or sooner if we can. The TC3 drilling program for EQC customers, for those of you under the cap, and there will be some of you in the room under the cap, will be done and dusted by the end of March 2013 or before, and on a collaborative basis with the rest of the insurers at the moment, the target date is the end of March 2014. Settlement. So for all EQC customers, we will have apportioned or cash settled your claim by May next year. So far, we've paid out $3.3 billion. So we're halfway through the 6.5. And for those of you within, again, my accountability, the 100,000 homes we've committed to repair, we will be finished entirely by December 2015, and if you've got damage over $50,000, by December 2013. And those are the things you can hold me to account for. And with that, I'll hand over to John McSweeney from the insurers, but John's from Sutton Response.
Thanks, Bruce.
Good evening. Yes, I'm John McSweeney. I'm with Southern Response, but this evening I'm speaking on behalf of all the insurers in Christchurch. So naturally the comments will be of a general nature rather than related to any one particular company. These topics that you can see up there now, they've come from a series of trial presentations that CERA and the insurers did to, and EQC, did to the community boards around Christchurch, particularly those that have TC3 areas in them. And these were the questions and the sort of topics that came back as people wanting to know about most in a general nature. So that's how these topics have come about. I'd just like to emphasise first of all that there are about approximately 10 insurance companies operating in Canterbury, and within those companies there are approximately 100 different policy wordings that you might have for insurance policies covering your home. So there are a lot of different insurance policy wordings. They've all got slightly different variations. So what you might be entitled to under one policy wording might be slightly different if your neighbour is with another company. The other thing is that I'd just like to emphasise that the insurance industry has got to grips with and does understand that TC3 is not a hazard designation. It has taken a little while for all of us to get our heads around that. It's recognised that it's not a hazard designation and it's not a premium rating factor in your insurance policy. All it means, as has been explained, is that if you are doing major repairs to a foundation or building a new house, then a geotechnical analysis has to be done of the land so that the type of foundation that's needed can be identified and designed for you. Overcap assessments. Now, as has been mentioned, your insurance company is responsible for damage that exceeds the EQC cap, generally regarded as $100,000 plus GST per event for any one event. So it has to be, EQC have to have paid you a cap which is more than $100,000 plus GST. There are a couple of little exceptions to that, like if you've got a much smaller house, like a 90 square metre house, then you won't get the $100,000. In your case, it's only $90,000 as a maximum cap. But also your private insurer covers things that EQC does not cover. Now these might include, or do include, driveways, paths and fences, those sorts of things. They're excluded from EQC cover. So your private insurer will be covering those for you, even if EQC have not paid a cap. And there are a lot of claims for the whole insurance industry for those sorts of things. It would be fair to say that each insurance company has got their own program that they've developed for the assessment of the claims that they have received. They've all taken slightly different strategies and they have different resources to call upon, but most have nearly completed assessments for claims that they've got lodged with them currently. Those that have not quite completed it have undertaken and made a commitment that they will all be completed for claims they know about by the end of this year. That is before Christmas this year. So everybody should then know whether they are under cap, or if they are over cap, their insurer will have identified for them whether they are a repair or a rebuild. The timing for repairs and rebuilds, unfortunately, it has been complicated in TC3, and most insurers have been doing a lot of work, but a program is now starting to emerge. And you heard Roger say earlier this evening that most insurers have identified in a global sort of way the estimated timetable for completion of repairs or rebuilds. Now, there is a little bit of variation in there, but I think you'll agree they're ranging in the 3, 4 years at the maximum. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to have to wait for those maximum times. New houses have been completed. Houses are being constructed right now, right across the city. Not very many, mind you, from insurers, but it has started and it will ramp up towards the end of this year and earlier next year. So I think it would be fair to say that you'll see a significant increase in rebuilds undertaken by insurers during next year. But also you do need to understand that, as has already been mentioned, the design of the foundations, choosing your own design for the house and all those things that go with it does take some time, and then once the consent is obtained, the construction, depending on resources, can get underway. So insurers are of necessity having to schedule those constructions throughout the year. Another thing that I'd just touch on very briefly, particularly for TC3 areas with the design of your house, is that we're starting to talk and ask you to think about lighter weight claddings and more rectangular or regular design shaped houses. Those sorts of houses are stronger and they perform a lot better in an earthquake, and it is something also that means that these sorts of houses will be more insurable going forward, quite possibly have better resale value for you and greater serviceability in the event that something happens to them. They can be more easily fixed. So it is something that we'll just ask you to think about. As you're aware, you're entitled to a similar sized house to what you had under most replacement type insurance policies, but it's something that you can think about for your own security going forward. The current and ongoing insurance in Green Zone TC3, all insurers have committed, all the major insurers have committed to remaining in Canterbury and insuring houses currently in TC3 and those that are repaired or that are rebuilt. If any house needs to have major repairs done on it or has to be rebuilt, existing insurers are committing to insuring that house on completion. It is true that most insurers have closed their books to taking on new customers in Canterbury, but as has already been mentioned, the market is starting to change, and that announcement by Westpac with Lumley that new houses will be able to be insured on completion for the new customers for them is encouraging news, and that is really just the start of the opening up of the insurance market in Christchurch. Just be aware for ongoing insurance that your insurance policy is an annual contract. At the renewal, premiums do change. We've all seen increases already, largely dictated by the insurers that the insurance companies have to reinsure with. But there are other costs locally as well, and because of the nature of the event that has occurred, it is likely that we will see changes to current insurance policies, not only in Christchurch, but these sorts of changes will apply right throughout New Zealand. And the sort of things that will come about are likely to be higher excess options or a higher, just an imposed higher excess for, say, damage to a driveway, for cracking and those sorts of things. That is likely to happen. The other major area that we need to start being ready for is that New Zealand is one of 2 countries in the world that has currently what's called an open-ended replacement policy, whereby your insurer undertakes to replace your house with a similar sort of house, and you don't have to worry about what it's going to cost. The insurer bears all the costs of the increased labour, the materials, the compliance and everything else. They don't have a dollar limit on it. Now that is going to change. We are going to end up with a replacement policy, but it will be capped at a sum insured. And that's something, again, that you just need to think about for the sort of house, the new house that you might have designed or built, that a capped sum insured is going to be the only sort of policy you'll be able to get. It'll be a realistic figure, realistic sum insured, but there's going to be a premium directly related to the value of the house that you're insuring, more closely aligned than it is now. So that's something just to consider and bear in mind. The area-wide drilling, Bruce has mentioned about this going on, and insurers are very seriously working and talking with EQC to get a definitive agreement and collaborative agreement for the area-wide drilling. It is of benefit to everyone in Christchurch that goes ahead in that way. The alternative is that all the insurers go out and just do their own in their own time, which will take a lot longer and affect everyone in Canterbury. The idea is that with the area-wide drilling, a lot more data will be obtained, and that will be of benefit to everyone in the Canterbury area, even if your particular section isn't drilled. All the insurers, or most anyway, also run their own what's called a complementary drilling program, or a infill drilling program, or a separate drilling program. Nowhere near on the scale that EQC is doing, but if your house isn't scheduled to be drilled, or your area isn't scheduled to be drilled for maybe another 6 months, and everything's ready to go and your insurer is agreeable, there is an opportunity for that to be done earlier, and that is happening at the moment throughout Christchurch. Deed of assignment. The sort of 2 common types in the industry that we're talking about with deed of assignment. The major one is that if you are buying an existing house, or you're selling your house, and it has got earthquake damage and it has not yet been repaired, whether it's with EQC or whether it's with your private insurer, you can transfer or assign your claim to the new purchaser. And the new purchaser can have the insurance claim benefit transferred to them. Now, you do need to be careful about that and seek legal advice, because if you are a purchaser, you did not take out the original insurance policy, and you may not be entitled to exactly the same benefits that the original owner was entitled to. So you do need to check and make sure that you are clear with what your entitlement will be if you take over someone else's policy. And if you're selling your house, the transfer can be done, but you as the seller and advise the purchaser that you both need to be clear of what the entitlement under your particular insurance policy and that claim relates to. The other sort of assignment that some insurers are offering is that you've heard about the apportionment issue with EQC. Once all of that is agreed, but the money hasn't actually been paid by EQC to you as the property owner, some insurers are able to, and you want to move on with either a rebuild or take one of the other policy options, your insurer could have the claim benefits from EQC assigned to them and take over the EQC benefit when that actually gets paid. So that means that if you're an over-cap repairs can be started earlier, or if you're a rebuild, you can get on with that more quickly than waiting until all that documentation and paperwork is completed. The settlement options that are available, again, each insurance policy is slightly different, but the main ones under a replacement policy is that the insurer will undertake to repair your house. If it is damaged beyond economic repair, you've got an option to have your house rebuilt on the same site, which is a common option. I'm sure you're all aware of that. The other option through most insurers is that you can take the rebuild money and build your new house on another site. You have to supply that site or that section. You still keep your original section, but it's an option that you could build on another site if you wish to do so. Another option, and many thousands of people have taken this through their insurance companies so far, is that if your house is a total loss or has to be rebuilt, you can take the rebuild money equivalent. You don't get it as a cheque, but you can take that equivalent money and buy another property that either may not have any damage or has got very minor cosmetic damage. It's a very quick and simple way of moving forward without having to be worried about the design and construction of a new house. So that is an option that's available under most insurance policies. If you just want a cheque, and go away and do whatever, then most insurance policies offer what's called a market value cash settlement. It is less than the rebuild cost amount, but it's also not what we might have traditionally assumed to be. I think most of us would traditionally assume that the market value would be what your house would sell for less an allowance for the land. But you'll find that in most insurance policies, the market value definition is worked out by taking what a brand new equivalent house would cost to build today, that figure there, and then it's depreciated by age and wear and tear. And in many cases that actually comes out more than the traditional market value view. But that is the entitlement for a cash settlement. Under all insurance policies that I'm aware of, there is no entitlement for an automatic cash or cheque for the cost of rebuilding the new house. Most insurers require, if you want that sort of arrangement, you've got to undertake to build a new house somewhere else. It's the only way that you can get that. So there's no automatic contractual right under the policy to receive a cash settlement for the rebuilding cost, but some negotiations have been done, but you just do need to be aware that it's not a contractual right that you're entitled to. Finally, I'd just like to mention for you that you might hear that we talk about you're going to have to get a building consent, you're going to have to arrange for geotech, you're going to have to get foundations especially designed, you're going to have to design your new house if it needs to be a rebuild. There's all these sort of things that you have to do, whether it's a repair, major repair, or a rebuild. All of the insurance companies have what's called a project management office, and that company will arrange all of that for you. So they'll work with you. The company will arrange and lodge the papers for the building consent, help and arrange for the design, and do all that sort of work for you. So arrange for the geotech analysis to be done and the design of the foundations, and importantly pay for all of those as well under the terms of your policy. So you don't have to go and actually do that yourself. You will see the building inspector come to your property, but be assured that that management of all of that and the documentation will be handled by your insurance company for you. Thank you.
So welcome Malcolm from Building and Housing, and he'll be followed by Aaron from Council.
Thanks, Chris. Well, good evening, everybody. Appreciate you've been here a wee while. I'll crack through my presentation fairly quickly. Just a little bit of context, as Roger mentioned at the beginning around, building and housing, who are we? Central government agency, we're part of a bigger government ministry, but we effectively are the central government agency that regulates the building and construction sector. So we set the standards and the quality requirements that buildings need to meet, the building code, and we maintain that and we change that over time as we learn new things, and we license builders and a whole bunch of other things. So we regulate the building and construction sector. Tonight I just want to cover off a couple of issues. I want to talk about what technical TC3 is and is not, get some clarity around that. I want to talk about how we came up with technical categories, what was the criteria used, and then I'll briefly run through some of our technical solutions in terms of the types of foundations that we've developed to date. If I dive through these slides, sorry, sort out the technology. Right. Look, I think it's really important to reiterate that technical categories, they're not a zoning, they're not a hazard category map, they are a form of guidance around the level of investigation necessary to work out, that's geotechnical investigation necessary, to then work out what type of foundations might be suitable for your property. And then there are also some technical solutions, some guidance around different types of foundations that are appropriate for your land. They do reflect the variability of the Canterbury soils, and as Roger mentioned, we did take a bit of a triage exercise at the front end of all of this. 182,000 houses in Greater Christchurch. We worked out pretty early on that there were those that had quite significant damage, those that were on good land and not so good land, and that we could, through area-wide investigations and a whole bunch of other criteria which I'll get into, we could slice up the Greater Christchurch region into categories, 3 no less, and that would free up a lot of our scarce technical resource. There is a limited number of geotechnical engineers and structural engineers, and we wanted to make sure they were applied to the area where they could best add the most value. That has enabled property homeowners in TC1 and TC2 areas to crack on through their insurance processes and get repairs underway and work through those insurance issues. And it has meant those that in TC3 have got to have this further investigation and design foundations to suit your conditions. So whilst I appreciate it doesn't feel like it for you in terms of a TC3 classified property, the concept was to try and speed things up overall for everybody. So what were some of the criteria used to develop technical categories? There's been a whole bunch of geotechnical engineers running around the Greater Christchurch region for a couple of years now. After every major quake, big programs of work to do investigations, lots of boreholes and drilling done across the Greater Christchurch region for some time now. So we had all of that information, and some of that goes back, almost 100 or more years in terms of some of the early geotech investigations. And in geological terms, that's pretty young because the land doesn't change much quickly. We had information around the LiDAR, the planes that fly over with the lasers, and that they survey the land and measure how far it's dropped or risen. And we had a lot of information and data around just looking at observing the damage that had played out, both to land and to buildings. So throwing all of that information together, geotechnical investigations that were undertaken area-wide, observed land and building damage and the LiDAR testing, we were able to categorise up those areas where there was more risk around future land damage that might cause building damage should we have a future significant earthquake. And by significant, we kind of mean a 5 or 5.5 or thereabouts, or greater. We get a lot of questions around, some people say, I'm in TC3, I didn't have liquefaction on my property, or I don't have significant building damage, why am I TC3? And I really want to explain, it's really about how the land is expected to perform in future. So it's looking ahead and making some judgments around how we need to make sure we rebuild on your area to the best possible we can. It's not necessarily just about how your building behaved in the earthquakes that we've had. It is definitely about building for the future. And ultimately, this is all about building fit for purpose, making your houses as more resilient, as resilient as we possibly can to any future earthquakes, which Roger assures us we're not going to have any of, so that's all good. Look, I guess too, this has all been a bit scary for a lot of people in Christchurch in terms of geotechnical investigations and structural engineers designing foundations, and it all sounds a bit serious and scary, and it's actually business as usual, normal practice in the building and construction sector around the rest of the country and in parts of Christchurch. for geotech investigations to be carried out, and then for structural engineers to design foundations based on what those geotech reports say, is business as usual in the building construction sector. Much of the Port Hills area in Christchurch has always required structural engineers to design the foundations because of the land conditions, the topography of building on cliffs and hillsides. Big parts of Auckland, South Auckland, a lot of expansive clay out there, so it contracts in the heat in the summer and it expands, it gets wet in the winter, so the land moves quite a bit in some of those expansive clay areas in South Auckland. So geotech investigations and specific design foundations, business as usual there. Big parts of areas of Canterbury subject to peat and bogs and marshlands, again, geotech investigations, structurally designed foundations. So, this is business as usual. It's well-practiced construction methodology. So then we've also done a lot of work around designing a lot of solutions, coming up and testing and trialling a lot of technical solutions for how we can both repair buildings in TC3 and rebuild new ones. So we've published a lot of technical solutions. It's pretty dry reading, heavy stuff for engineers, but both for foundation repairs and for rebuilds. We did get a whole bunch of technical specialists together. We call them the Engineering Advisory Group, a whole bunch of specialists in earthquake seismicity and structural engineering and geology, and Mike here is one of our geotech engineers. And they have produced a lot of this work. Then we've had it peer-reviewed domestically and then peer-reviewed internationally. And then we've tested and trialled stuff as well, and some of you might be familiar with the testing we did out at QE2 Park, where we built a number of our trialled foundation solutions, and we tested that, simulated earthquakes and recreated liquefaction and to see how they would perform. So an awful lot of work's gone into making sure that the technical solutions we're delivering now to the sector to help get efficiency and consistency are well-founded. And we had the December 23rd earthquake, which gave us a real-life test out at QE2 in terms of what we had constructed there. There's been a bit of talk recently about the weight of buildings and cladding systems, and we want to just talk about that for a bit. A lesson for us from the February earthquake was that, generally speaking, buildings that had lighter weight claddings perform better than those that had heavyweight claddings. And by heavyweight, we mean sort of brick, concrete masonry, concrete tile roofs. A lot of buildings like that had a bit of a rough time during the February quake, and bricks came down and concrete tiles got tossed around and came off. And those buildings that had lightweight cladding, such as timber weatherboard and corrugated iron or tin roofs, perform better. And so that's been a big lesson and learning for us at a building standard level. And so we're unashamedly encouraging people to think about, as they repair or rebuild their houses, is there an opportunity to replace the cladding or rebuild new with lighter weight claddings, because they'll just be more resilient in future than heavyweight ones. So for those that have got significant repair jobs or in the rebuild and new houses space, please expect to have those conversations with your project management officers if they're leading the repair or rebuild, because they're going to be having conversations with you about considering lighter weight claddings. And our advice is they certainly perform better in future significant earthquakes and are more resilient. Picture about these, just to illustrate some of this, because we do get the odd question, is that a cheap and inferior solution? Are you trying to take a cheap job, and am I not going to have the right kind of cladding? Cantabrians love their brick and tile, but we're really kind of saying, look, this stuff can be quite attractive, really durable, fit for purpose, meet the code, and be a really good solution. And I guess a good example of a lightweight cladding that's certainly proved itself is the good old timber weatherboard. It's been sort of here in New Zealand for 150 plus years, and again has proved itself very well through these earthquakes. So in terms of technical solutions, our engineering advisory group done a lot of work and come up with sort of three kind of fundamental approaches, if you like, a whole bunch of criteria that geotech and structural engineers need to apply to a specific property when they have that geotech information. So in that respect, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but absolutely the foundation work, if you excuse the pun, has been done in terms of the design, and this is going to make the overall design and rebuild program a whole lot more efficient, because we won't have to have so many bespoke solutions, and get that consistency in terms of quality of the building standards. Helps the council to consent this stuff quicker, because they've got confidence that it's going to meet the code. So we'll dive into some of these just very quickly. Deep piles, a long proven type of foundation construction method in New Zealand. Properties in TC3 typically have a thinner crust. The crust is the term we use to describe the top layer of earth or soil where often a house or a building's foundations are bedded into it. And then sometimes they'll have a layer of liquefiable land below. And this concept here is really about getting piles that go down past all of that and find good, firm, bearing soil and ground to bed themselves into, to take the load of the house above. Deep piles may be an appropriate solution for complicated design houses that have lots of different wings and shapes and what have you, or have heavyweight clad materials. So we're not saying you can't build with heavyweight clad materials, and this is perhaps one of the solutions, because there's a lot of weight in those heavyweight claddings, and deep piles can help to take the load of all of that. Not always appropriate for areas prone to lateral spread, such as around waterways, because if there is another significant earthquake and we have those horizontal forces on the foundations, then that's an awful lot of strain and pressure that can go on those deep piles. So it'll be appropriate in some situations and not in others. And the graphic designer got carried away and did lots of pictures. Okay, ground improvements. This is proving to be, we've done a lot of work here, and this is one of the options that may be appropriate around areas prone to lateral spread. Concept here is really simple. Cut down and scrape away the land below the building platform up to about 2 metres deep, and remove that ground and replace it with compacted hard fill, sometimes injected with cement, and really remediate the land underneath your building platform and create a really good raft or remediated building platform. And then often you can build TC2 foundations on top of that land remediation or ground improvement process. Lightweight or re-levelling of platforms. Look, a lot of houses in Christchurch are old villas, bungalows. They have a lot of timber and concrete piles. We've come up with a raft of solutions around how to fix those and re-level those. One of those solutions involves having putting a skirt around those foundations of plywood around the outside and nailing it all off, and it braces the house and holds it really tight together, makes it resilient. So that's one of the solutions for timber piles. And then we get into a solution for concrete slabs as well, and that's effectively a raft where the concept here is the foundation sits more across the land rather than in the land, and it's really super strong, and it will ride out future earthquakes. It might get tossed around a little bit if there's settlement, but could be re-levelled if it gets out of shape, and connected up to services that might have broken away during another significant earthquake, such as the sewer and the stormwater, and really be habitable again very quickly, because it hasn't broken up. The foundations haven't broken up like many of them did in the earthquakes that we had, particularly February. So, and some of the terms used here, raft is often used to describe that type of foundation. I guess just to summarise, again, I really want to reiterate TC3, it isn't a zoning, it's guidance around the level of investigation that a geotech engineer is going to need to do in or around your property, and then the information that creates for a structural engineer to design a solution. And TC3 is about a whole bunch of technical solutions for building a fit-for-purpose foundation for your site, specific to your site. At the back, we've got a whole lot of fact sheets around the stuff and some of the detailed foundation solutions. So I would encourage you to grab some of those fact sheets before you leave tonight, and I'll be available later on for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Aaron.
Thanks, Chris. I'm just going to talk to you about 4 main things tonight. So the first one's going to be about the future of consenting and how we're getting on at the council, gearing ourselves up and getting ready for all of the consents that we expect to get. And then a little bit about flood management, about limbs as well, not the arms and legs types, but land information, and then a little bit about rates, because I know some people are interested in that. All right, so at the council we're pretty aware of the task that's ahead of us, and we've been doing quite a lot to get ready for all of the consents. We've got ourselves into quite a good position at the moment, and we're still carrying out certain things to make continuous improvements there. And amongst those things, some of the things we've done are improved some of the technology that we use, and improved some of the processes that we use at the council. So in terms of the technology, we've we've taken on a new computing system, so we've got a really good system now for sharing documents with some of our key customers. And as well as that, we've looked at some of those processes and tried to make them a lot more efficient and at the council as well. And so what some of that technology allows us to do is to tap into some other resources around the country. So as well as taking on a whole lot of extra staff at the council, we've geared up and increased, we've got an allowance for about another 70 staff just in the building area of council. We've taken on a good 30 odd of that 70 so far, and as we start to get busier, we'll increase those numbers up to the 70 and then see how we go from there. But just to make sure we've got a bit of a life raft, I guess, we've actually been negotiating with other councils around the country and engineering organisations to make sure that we've got that backup. And right now, 3 of our staff are in Wellington, and they're training up Wellington consenting staff there so they can process for us. And with their online computing system, they can just log on and view all of the documents that anybody submits to us for consent, and we can ensure that we do get stuff out on time for people. All right, ever since the September event, we started forming relationships with the insurance companies and working with their project management officers that John talked about. So with each of those insurance companies having a good sized project management office and a large number of jobs to deal with, we thought by working really closely with them, there's some really good efficiencies we could get in the consent and inspection process. And so far, that's proving to be really good as well. So, we'd encourage you to try and use those project management companies. They know what the expectations of council are, they know what the rules are, and their consent quality, the quality of the applications is so much better for us. And it's much easier for us to deal with and get those jobs out on time. All right, so just a little bit more about flood management areas. So some of you might have heard about Variation 48. Okay, so that was conceived quite a long time ago, back in the 90s, and there are a number of areas in the city that were identified as risky areas. And I guess the council had a desire to make sure that people that were building in those areas were well protected. And so what Variation 48 proposed was the need to get resource consent, and it proposed a certain height, some flood heights for those areas. And I guess what it does is it highlights the need to take into consideration special design aspects when you're designing a building to go on land. So rather than just leaving it up to chance that somebody's going to take in the flooding into account, there's that layer of protection there. It's highlighted through the RMA, and you can take into account those special features that you need to protect your building and ensure that you're protected from those flood events. So, there's things that happen like when you start filling the land to build your building platform up and raise your building a bit up, that affects things like your overland flood paths. So water needs to flow from one site to the next in a natural kind of a way. And when you start building up the land and blocking off those flood paths, that has a detrimental effect for, say, your neighbour, and you end up creating a swimming pool for them. So the flood management areas help deal with those sorts of things. Okay, so some of the key areas there that are affected by the flood management areas is the Styx, the lower areas. Styx people be aware of that out in Spencerville there. The Avon and Heathcote rivers and the Lansdowne Valley area of that catchment there, and some of the lower lying coastal areas as well. So flood management is about both rainfall and tidal effects. So if you're in those areas, it's not too hard to deal with. There's a number of solutions now that we've got for design in some of those flood management areas, and so it's just something that you'll need to work through. Actually, just before I move on, in regard to obtaining the level for your own property, there's a new website or some website information that's about to be released next month, and you'll actually be able to log in there and look up your individual property, and that'll tell you what your floor level is for your house if you have to rebuild it. Now, designers will look at that site and take that information and consider that when they're coming up with a design for a rebuild. There are some situations where you can rely on an existing floor height that was there before. under existing use rights under the RMA. But as soon as you start to change the scope or the scale of your project, then you're likely to put yourself into that resource consent area where the minimum floor heights come into play. And there's actually two floor heights that we deal with when you're building a building, and one is the one that's required by the Building Code, the Building Act floor height, and then there's the flood management area floor height if you're in an FMA. All right, so on to LIMS. So a land information memorandum, it's mainly designed for people purchasing property, and if you want to buy a property, if you want to know something about the property before you're purchasing it, council can provide a LIM to you, so you can apply for a LIM, and it's going to tell you about everything that the council knows about your particular piece of land. It's not about an individual project necessarily. They will list resource consents and building consents that have been obtained for the property. There's another thing called a PIM that you might have heard of, and that's a project information memorandum, so don't confuse the two. The PIM is related to an individual project, and you can use a PIM to tell you things like the minimum floor heights, the flood level information, that sort of thing, related to the actual building that you're going to build. But the LIMs are actually about more about the land. So now that we have these new technical land categories, if you apply for a LIM, that'll give you some information on what land category you're in. As well as that, if we've had geotechnical information submitted to council, you're likely to find out that your council has that information on record. As well as what you get in a LIM, council holds property files for a number of properties, and there's quite a bit of information that you can get just by requesting your property file and trawling through it and seeing what's there. So, old consents that were applied for, old building permits from way back, a lot of that information is held by council, okay, so it's readily obtainable. All right, so just touching on rates. So rates is not my area of expertise at the council. I'm a building consent manager, but I know that a lot of people are interested in how their property is affected by rates. Their rates are affected. And so the council has decided to give about a 40% rates remission for people who can't live in their house. And so the reason why it's not 100% is because rates don't just pay for things like your sewer and your water and rubbish collection, the services for your individual property. There's a whole lot of other things like libraries and there's pools, although a lot of those aren't in very good condition at the moment, we'd have to appreciate. But we've got to get back to that good place, all right? So there's a whole lot of stuff that rates pay for, community facilities, transport and infrastructure and road maintenance. And so at the moment, council is seeking permission from government to review and look at another regime for reducing those rates remissions even further to down to a lower amount. Because at the moment, even if you remove your building, you're kind of locked into that current year's rating demand, and you'll have to pay rates on the property, including the improvements on the site, so your building and land. But we're hoping to get approval from central government so that when you remove your building, you only end up paying rates on the land, okay? So, just keep in mind that even if you own a piece of land, if I go and buy a section in another part of the country, even though I don't live on it and I don't build a house on it, I'm going to have to pay rates on that bit of land. So that's where we want to get to with properties that the houses have been removed on. All right. So I think that's about it from me. I can take some questions from you shortly, but I'll hand back to Chris.
I'll just hand over to Roger to do a sum up.
Look, I'll be quick. I think the key concepts we've tried to get across tonight is these new foundations are designed so your house will withstand any design earthquake going forward. Your insurer, if you've got a replacement policy, is going to be contractually obliged to build you one of those new strong foundations. The cost of the drilling is not at your cost; it will nearly always be at the cost of the insurer or EQC. And I guess lastly, that point about how insurers feel about Christchurch. I think the fact that IAG spent hundreds of millions of dollars buying AMI off the government when it started going broke, the fact they spent hundreds of millions of dollars buying it showed a commitment that they really do want to be here. Insurers actually want to continue to insure us here. And lastly, for some of you who do get fed up with the wait, you're going to be tempted to just take the cash and do things yourself. I just be careful when you do that. If you're going to take the cash, have a plan of what you're going to do. So Some people, I heard someone who took the cash of $300,000 or whatever the number was on the promise the builder would build them a house for $300,000. But when they got the cash in their bank account, they went back to the builder and said, oh, well, actually it's $330,000 now. So before you do anything like take the cash, be really careful. Make sure you've had very good advice from legal advice and that sort of thing. Make sure you've got signed contracts from someone who's going to do what you want to do next. But I hear your frustration tonight. I hear the anger. We'll continue working as hard as we can. Thank you.